Hi, I'm Alex Durkee.
I'm Ava Myhan.
We're students at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, interviewing Attorney General Skrmetti.
You've backed broad First Amendment protections in cases like the NRA's. Should colleges protect all speech, even offensive or hateful rhetoric, or can they impose limits to maintain a civil learning environment?
So there are limits that have to be there based on federal law about discrimination. You can't make people feel as if they're being excluded from the university in specific ways directed at them. And there are limits based on threats and incitement of violence. But beyond that, there needs to be a robust debate. You have to be able to disagree with people in the university setting, because that's how knowledge happens. If everybody's just agreeing or suppressing opposing viewpoints, nobody's learning, nobody's refining thoughts, nobody's innovating. So there are limits to what can be said, but they're very limited limits. And the goal should always be to ensure that people are free to speak their mind, free to come up with new and challenging ideas, free to be different.
Professors often face pushback for controversial statements. How should Tennessee balance academic freedom with public accountability for taxpayer-funded institutions?
So I think individual professors being provocative is not a problem. I think the concern from the public perspective is when all of the controversy is going in one direction. If an indication is there that the valence of controversy at the university is all directed in one way, that undermines people's faith that it's an institution that truly is challenging different ideas and giving students a robust learning environment.
So this is a more IAC engaged question to the Institute of American Civics. As students studying civics at the IAC, American history plays a huge part in our studies. How does history inform your engagement with your field and civics as a whole?
So, the law is basically history in action, right? It is the sum of all of the historical legal practices that have gone in and the historical processes of representative government in action, and we sort of work through that to figure out what the next steps are. So I'm very cognizant of history. The Tennessee Attorney General's office is different than others. I'm appointed by our Supreme Court, and it's an 8-year term, and so I automatically come in thinking with a longer time horizon than my colleagues, just because I know I'm going to be here for longer. I want to do my part to ensure that the institution stays strong, that we adapt to the times where we need to, but that we're doing what's necessary to protect Tennessee's interests based on, all of the history that's gone into creating the Tennessee Constitution, the laws that we have, and recognizing that, a check on the other parts of government. Every part of government serves as a check on the other parts of government, and I need to play my role not to aggrandize the AG's office, but to make sure that there's that dynamic tension throughout the constitutional structure at the federal and state levels to keep everybody free.
So generally, what do you tell a college student graduating into this America?
So no matter what you're studying in college, no matter what profession that you're going to be engaged in, you're also going to be somebody participating in the American political conversation. And as a self-governing people, it's important that we have informed and thoughtful participation by everybody. So even if you're going to go into business or science or education, whatever, you should know enough history to have some perspective on where we are now and understand how we got here. And you should be able to articulate your positions and listen to people who disagree with you. And be able to engage in that kind of back and forth, because the people who want to go into politics are a tiny minority of the sum of graduates of any university, but everybody's going to have a role to play in the decision making as the state and the country go forward.
How do you view the role of private tech companies like X or Meta in moderating speech, especially when their decisions impact political discourse?
So I think it's incredibly dangerous for any tech company to put a thumb on the scales with respect to political conversations, particularly since the people who are involved in the decision-making process at the tech companies are not a representative cross-section of America. It's a fairly thin monoculture, geographically bound, people from very particular educational and financial backgrounds. And the whole point of having a broad representative democracy in our republic is to make sure that all voices are heard. So the trust that people have in the political conversation is substantially reduced when one side is being suppressed. And I think we're seeing a lot of that play out now. People feel like they were deliberately silenced, that there was a concerted effort to marginalize their viewpoints regardless of how many people adopted them, and the tech company activity is a big part of that.
A focus on the Institute for American Civics is the philosophical underpinnings of American institutions. How can we bridge the gap between abstract theory and real-world civic engagement?
So you need to have the abstract theory. You need to be able to orient yourself in sort of the grand tradition of political debate and discourse. But it's pointless to just sit around theorizing. You got to get out and meet people. You got to meet people from different backgrounds. However that happens. When I was a young prosecutor, I went to a pretty fancy law school, went to a pretty fancy grad school, but then I was prosecuting domestic violence misdemeanors, and I met people from backgrounds I had never encountered before. I mean, people who had very different, much harder lives than I had, and got to understand what their lives looked like at least a little bit. And then when I went on to do federal prosecution, I was dealing with horrifically victimized people from extraordinarily impoverished backgrounds. And in my role now, I occasionally interact with billionaires, senators, and by being able to relate to people from every different background, you get a much better idea of what this country is and how it works. But step one is just getting out and doing something. You can't sit in the ivory tower. You can't surround yourself with people like you who think like you. You have to engage with real people in the real world.